Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A Conservative MP from central Alberta blasted the Trudeau Liberals during question period today, saying with a high cost of living, more Canadians are now eating expired food. The Alberta government announced a major investment to support child and youth mental health services. And a legendary Conservative columnist and a voice on the airwaves has passed away. Rex Murphy dies from cancer at the age of 77.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A new report says the Canadian economy added 90,000 jobs last month. That was more than analysts were expecting. Economists say today's report of a job increase in April will give the Bank of Canada pause, since it reinforces the point the economy is not rolling over. Stats Canada says the jobless rate held steady at 6.1%. Economists have been expecting the central bank to begin cutting interest rates next month or in July, but today's report has them feeling less certain about a cut next month. Red Deer-Lacombe Conservative MP Blaine Calkin says Canadians are at a breaking point. During question period in the House of Commons today, Calkin says the spending by the Trudeau government is making life so much more expensive for all of us.
Record demand at our food banks. We have now learned that 60% of Canadians have resorted to eating expired food. Yet this NDP Liberal government can't help themselves. They have hiked the carbon tax another 23% on April 1st as part of their plan to quadruple it by 2030. Why does this Prime Minister hate Canadians who just want to heat their home, feed their kids, and drive to work? Why won't he just axe the tax?
Conservatives talk down our economy every day in this House, while in reality Canada's economy has shown great resilience despite the global shocks that it's been under. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the lowest deficit in the G7, a AAA credit rating that's been reaffirmed. Warren Buffett, while talking about investing in Canada, says we do not feel uncomfortable in any way, shape or form putting money into Canada.
There was a moment of silence at the end of question period earlier today as MPs honored Rex Murphy, the sharp-witted journalist, columnist, and TV broadcaster who died of cancer at the age of 77. Even while he battled the disease, he still filed stories, including those about the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza. In fact, he passed away a day after his column on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's stance on the Hamas atrocities of October the 7th appeared on the front page of the National Post. Born in Newfoundland in 1947, Murphy was the second of 5 children. He was a Rhodes Scholar who also enjoyed 17th century poetry. Now, back in 1981, he made an attempt to run for the Federal Conservative Party. He walked away from that, instead working for provincial Tory leader Frank Moores. Murphy also hosted a wide range of programs for the CBC. His voice in our airwaves and his various columns will be sorely missed. Well, it appears as though rent keeps going up across Canada. According to a new study by Rentals.ca and Urban Nation, rent for all residential property types increased 9.3% across Canada in April compared to the same period last year. Purpose-built rentals outpaced condos with a growth rate of 13.1%. Saskatchewan was the provincial leader in annual rent growth, surpassing Alberta with an 18.4% increase. Ontario was the only province to see a decrease with a 0.3% monthly decline. The average rent there is now $2,404. Now, when it came to the big cities, Edmonton was the leader in rent growth with a 13.3% increase. Vancouver, meanwhile, declined 7.8% year over year for an average of $2,982. Toronto rents were down 2.3% annually to an average of $2,757. Now, Canada's most expensive rental market remained North Vancouver, with apartments averaging $3,190 a month. The Alberta government announced that close to $66 million will be going towards more than 450 new affordable housing units and shelter beds across the province. Officials say that will also include more funding for seniors housing and supportive housing facilities. 8 providers will be working on the housing projects here in Lethbridge, also in Red Deer, Lake Louise, the Enoch Cree Nation, and in Trochu. Officials say this is part of the government's efforts to support low-income and vulnerable Albertans. Financial support from various levels of government helped to fund new construction of 50 new homes in Lethbridge. The new project will be built at 1730 10th Avenue South, the former Seasons Lethbridge Retirement Community Building. Matthew Pitcher, a Housing Solutions Coordinator at the City of Lethbridge, talks about how this community-friendly investment creates more affordable housing for those 55 and older.
Provincial government this morning announced funding for Concept Investment Partners' affordable housing project here in the amount of approximately $2.2 million. Back in October of 2023, City Council approved capital funding to Concept Investment Partners for this project, which will include 50 units of housing for individuals aged 55 and over. And of those 50 units, 37 will be held at affordable rates. And the funding commitment from the city ensures that there is some level of affordability continued for a 20-year term.
Because of the nature of this building and its history, it was built in 2003. It's a fully accessible building. The hallways are wide enough for wheelchairs, the doors are wide enough. And we thought this is a great building for an adaptive reuse into a new affordable living community. See the proximity to the hospital. We know that at a 55 plus community, there's many people that in that demographic that don't have vehicles to drive. So different medical appointments and access to the hospital is probably something that is very attractive. And so that's one of the reasons why into our thought process on the building. We're going to have the application process happen in the next 30 to 45 days. Our first units we believe will be on stream July, early August.
I just want to thank Minister Nixon and the provincial government for the financial support of nearly $2.3 million towards this important project here in the community. And we all know that housing is a major topic of concern. So at a meeting last October, Council was pleased to support the project with nearly $1.3 million in capital funding.
The capital funding from the city was conditional on securing matching funds from both the provincial and federal governments. We enjoyed another beautiful day across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, the spectacular days will continue all the way up until Mother's Day on Sunday?
Oh, it'll be a gorgeous weekend to take mom out for lunch on a patio or on a picnic or have a barbecue or whatever you do, just get outside because it's going to be gorgeous. We have a warm, sunny 27-degree day on a Saturday and very similar conditions to that on Mother's Day Sunday. We are seeing a bit of gusty wind though. So we're seeing winds from the west at 20 kilometers per hour, gusting to 40 much the same that we had today and again tonight. And then after Saturday, we're seeing a lovely Mother's Day on Sunday before we get into some showers for next week. So I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about that.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Video of a police interrogation has been released at the trial of Jeremy Skibicki. He's admitted to killing 4 women in Winnipeg. He told police that the killings were racially motivated. His lawyers say he should not be found criminally responsible because of mental illness.
I really just wanted to see how far, I could take things because the criminal justice system is a joke. The world that we're living in is sick. I was driven to do stuff like this because I was so spent emotionally. Mm-hmm. I killed 4 people.
Okay. Thank you for your honesty.
I did this because I believe that there should be capital punishment.
Okay.
And that this is racially motivated.
Police in southern Alberta say Medicine Hat Man has been arrested for luring an American youth. Following a lengthy investigation, Alert, along with police at the Williamson County Sheriff's Office in Tennessee, say the suspect allegedly convinced a 13-year-old youth to share sexually explicit photos online. The offenses date back to 2021 when the child was just 11 years of age. Police say there were over 7,000 messages exchanged between the 38-year-old Tyler Clark and his victim. Clark faces a number of charges, including child luring, making child pornography, accessing and possession of child pornography. His next court appearance will be on May the 22nd. A number of pro-Palestinian protesters who refused to leave the University of Calgary campus were arrested on Thursday. Police say they were called to the school to deal with those attending the rally, who, when asked to leave, refused to do so. Officials say a number of protesters had begun setting up tents on the south lawn of McEwen Hall. Police say when officers moved in, the protests turned violent. They say projectiles were thrown at them and barricades had to be removed. Police used non-lethal munitions to pacify the crowd, and fortunately there were no injuries reported. By 11:15 p.m., a number of the protesters were taken into custody and removed from the park. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith applauded the actions by police, saying trespassing and camping on post-secondary property should not be allowed. The UN General Assembly voted by a wide margin to grant new rights and privileges to Palestine and called on the Security Council to reconsider its request to become the 194th member of the United Nations.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/ES10/L30/revision 1, entitled Admission of New Members to the United Nations. Will all delegations confirm that their votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed.
Needless to say, Israel was not happy with the United Nations vote. An Israeli envoy denounced the UN backing of a resolution granting Palestine new rights and shredded a copy of the UN Charter.
You are shredding the UN Charter with your own hands. Yes, that's what you're doing, shredding the UN Charter. Shame on you. Thank you, Mr. President.
The report surfacing now that Palestinians may be allowed to return to the northern portion of the Gaza Strip. According to TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto, the Israel Defense Forces say this plan may help in the return of hostages still being held by the terrorist group Hamas.
The IDF is currently completing large transit routes with remote inspection means using cameras with facial recognition software. This will allow for a quick return of hundreds of thousands of civilians to northern Gaza in the near future, which was a key demand of Hamas in the negotiations of the return of the Israeli hostages and establishing a ceasefire. It is also in Israel's interest that these people not remain in tent cities in the south of the Gaza Strip where there is still active combat going on. Speaking on which, the IDF recently observed the activity of hundreds of Hamas terrorists from different parts of the Strip moving to reinforce the shattered battalions in the central cities of the Strip. This includes the Nuseirat and El Bourish battalions, which continue to strike at the IDF using IEDs and ambushes.
Closer to home, Alberta government officials say the province is investing $148 million over the next 2 years to support record-breaking expansion of child and youth mental health services. Officials say the project is in partnership with CASA Mental Health. It'll offer a wide range of support, including live-in treatment, in-school support, family and trauma support. Now, $40 million of the funding will go to triple the number of CASA mental health classrooms, and $98 million will operate 3 new live-in treatment facilities.
CASA classrooms provide a reprieve for them to have that absolute highest level of care that those children deserve, which benefits every classroom and every student across the province. Currently, 8 of these classrooms operate in Alberta and 12 more to be scheduled online in early 25. Thanks to the additional funding by the Premier and this government, 60 mental health classrooms will be operational by September 2026, supporting more than 140 communities across the province. And all told, this $148 million, the doubling of support, is going to support over 2,000 students per year when it comes to severe and intense mental health supports in our schools and in our communities.
A new study says there's a direct correlation between hearing loss and dementia. Audiologist Glenn Hull, who spoke at SACPA in Lethbridge earlier this week, says the research done over 10 years suggests that hearing impairment may reflect the risk of cognitive decline and dementia as it relates to brain atrophy. Hull says issues like forgetting where we put our car keys or why we walked into a room is normal with aging, but not being able to recall basic information, struggling to find words, or doing simple tasks, that is not. Hull says dementia is predicted to double every 20 years, and by the year 2050, more than 100 million people around the world could be affected. That's 1 in 85 people around the world suffering from dementia. Infertility is becoming a real concern here in Canada. A recent report showed that back in 2022, our country's fertility rate hit the lowest point on record in more than a century. Dr. Caitlin Dunn, a physician at the Prelude Network in Canada, explains why she believes fertility has been on the decline for over 20 years.
One of the main factors is that women are choosing to have children later in life, and there are many legitimate reasons for this. They're pursuing education, they have ready access to contraception, career goals. It's getting more expensive to afford a house and meet a partner and have a family. And all of those things are making it, pushing it later in life that women are having children. Whereas women, after their mid-30s, their fertility declines significantly. So biologically speaking, the best time to have kids is actually in your late 20s and early 30s. But the pressures of our society mean that for many of us, that's hard to do. When it comes to infertility, about 50% of the time, there is at least a male factor, and 1/3 of the time, it's only sperm problems. Some of the main causes that we see of male infertility are when men are taking supplements, especially testosterone for bodybuilding. That can cause the sperm counts to go down significantly, sometimes even to 0.
Dunn adds that here in Canada, 1 in 6 couples has infertility issues. Well, we enjoy lots of sunshine here in Lethbridge today, along with above average temperatures. And with the weekend coming up, the mercury should be climbing even more. Full weather details are coming up. It was another gorgeous day across much of southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Happy early Mother's Day, Jeanette. Now, speaking of moms, it looks like a beautiful Mom's Day weekend is shaping up.
Well, thank you, Hal, for that. And yes, it is going to be a splendid Mother's Day weekend. We are seeing some beautiful conditions there, particularly on the weekend before we start getting into a little bit cooler and more rainy conditions, which I wish I could say those hot sunny days are here to last, but we are going to see some rain, which should still make those farmers pretty happy. So after a 27 and a 26 degree day on Saturday and Sunday with mainly cloudy skies, we are going to see those showers start to develop. Sunday evening, that's Mother's Day evening, 30% chance of showers that night into 60% chance on Monday with a high of 23 degrees, down another 5 degrees there on Tuesday. I have 18 degrees, mainly cloudy conditions. And then we're jumping back up to the 20s there for Wednesday with a mix of sun and cloud and 21. And then we're back down to the teens again on Thursday with a 60% chance of showers and a high of 17 degrees. So there you go. Summer not here quite yet. Average high for this time of year, 17. Average low, 3. 31, that was our record high. That happened on this day back in 1940. And in 1946, we had the record low, which was -9. 5 at 52, that is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 9:04 p.m. We're looking at 15 hours, 12 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. Okay, lovely 20 degrees on the coast there in the island. Victoria could see a little bit more cooler conditions as you get closer to the water there, more like 17 degrees, clear skies. Clear skies in Vancouver as well, high of 19, but 27 as you get more further inland there. 21 for a high in Edmonton with a mix of sun and cloud, and mainly sunny conditions in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 25 degrees. As we get into Saskatchewan, we're seeing a little bit of windy conditions, up to 30K winds and 30 to 50K winds in Regina. Saskatoon, 25 is the expected high tomorrow. Clear skies and a beautiful sunny day as well in Regina, high of 26, 27 for a high in Winnipeg. Now, Winnipeg's going to start out sunny. We're going to see increasing clouds. We're going to see 30% chance of showers in the late morning, and by afternoon, we're seeing 60% chance of showers and a risk of a late afternoon thunderstorm. So we are looking at a little bit rainy conditions there in Winnipeg. As we get to the central part of the country, Toronto, there we're also seeing sunny conditions with increasing clouds, and then seeing a 30% chance of showers by the afternoon, high of 15 degrees. In both Ottawa and Montreal, also seeing increasing clouds throughout the day with a 40% chance of showers in the afternoon. 17 is the expected high tomorrow in Ottawa and Montreal, looking at 19 degrees. As we get into the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, take a look at Fredericton there, 15 for a high, partly cloudy skies, 8 for a high in Halifax. Charlottetown sitting at 13 degrees tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud, and high of only 4 degrees in St. John's. A little bit further inland you go, you're going to get a bit of a warmer weather there, more like 9 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Alberta government announced a new investment into our province's innovative technology. Advanced Education Minister Rajan Sani says that includes $12.9 million over the next 3 years to expand the Centre for Innovation in Manufacturing Technology Access Centre at Red Deer Polytechnique.
This strategic investment will expand the CIMTAC, almost doubling the space, and by 2030 give RDP greater capacity to train up to 2,400 students and help businesses across our economy remain competitive and grow. Through this investment, more Alberta-based manufacturers across multiple sectors will be able to develop, test, and scale their ideas. And more RDP students, like the ones behind me, will be engaged at the forefront of Made in Alberta technologies and manufacturing solutions.
Officials say construction on the expansion at Red Deer Polytechnique will begin as early as next year. Each year, Canadians lose millions upon millions of dollars to scammers through different methods of online fraud. Corporal Sean Milne from the Alberta RCMP Provincial Financial Crime Team offers a couple of signs that a great financial opportunity might in fact be a scam.
The two biggest things we like to point out for a lot of scams is the scammers create a sense of urgency and secrecy because they don't want to give you time to double check. They want you to act fast before you have a chance to check on the opportunity, and they don't want you to talk to other people who might clue you in that this is a scam. So they'll want you to keep it under your hat until they have had a chance to actually take your money. So anytime someone's pushing you to act quickly and to not tell anybody about it, those are two very big red flags.
Corporal Sean Milne will also share a number of scams you need to be on the lookout for. Catch more of that informative interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 66 points on the day to finish at 22,308. The Dow was up 125 points to 39,512. The S&P 500 was up 8 points on the day to 5222, and the Nasdaq was down 5 points to 16,340. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.08 to 78.18 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 5 cents to $2.25 US. Gold was up $14.12 on the day to $23.60.45 US an ounce, and silver was down 13 cents to $28.18 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.30 per bushel, barley's at $6.42, canola's at $14.10, and corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle June contract was up 20 cents to $176.15. Feeder cattle were up 15 cents to $238.80, and lean hogs were down 25 cents to $91.73. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.14 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta government officials say the province is investing $148 million over the next 2 years to support record-breaking expansion of child and youth mental health services. Officials say the project is in partnership with CASA Mental Health. It'll offer a wide range of support, including live-in treatment, in-school support, family, and trauma support. So how can you tell if something is a scam? How can you really protect yourself and your family from all of the online fraud out there today? Sean Milne is with the Alberta RCMP Financial Crime Team, and he will share some tips on how to protect yourself in just a moment with BCN's Jeanette Rocher. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Well, every year, Canadians lose millions of dollars to scammers. But why and how does this happen? And what can we do to avoid getting caught in a scam? Well, joining me to discuss this further is Corporal Sean Milne, who is part of the RCMP Alberta Provincial Financial Crime Team. Welcome to Bridge City News, Sean. Great to have you on today.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so Sean, how bad is this situation right now? Are fraud scams on the rise? Because it really seems like they are.
Fraud scams, at least in how they're reported, do rise year after year. Statistics from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre show there's always more victims reporting and more dollars lost. Sometimes that's by virtue of more people reporting, which is what we like. But unfortunately, a lot of it is because more scams are happening.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It seems like it's constantly in the news, another scam, another scam. And I understand, too, that phishing scams are still one of the top problems out there. Can you maybe explain how these work and what we should do to avoid them?
Well, phishing scams come in a variety of methods. Usually the most prevalent ones are through email or text message. Phone phishing also happens. Typically, in phishing cases, what they're looking to do is to either solicit personal information from you that they can then go and use in a later scam, or if they have access to technology or your devices through the phish, like if they send you an email or a text, they'll want to direct you to a website they control, where they get you to input your personal information, or download an attachment that will install malware on your computer, which will allow them to either harvest your information or put something like ransomware on there that will result in further loss.
Oh, it's so unfortunate. Now, we have a fairly significant senior population in the Lethbridge area. So are seniors at a higher risk?
To some scams, to a certain extent, yes. The scammers don't necessarily discriminate on age. They'll take, unfortunately, anybody. But seniors do often tend to be home more often. They often have more disposable income that they can unfortunately lose if they fall prey to a scam. And sometimes they're not necessarily as up to date on what kind of scams are out there. So that does often, unfortunately, make them an easier target.
Yeah, true. Now, are there any particular scams that are aimed at older individuals?
Emergency scams are something that often are pointed more towards the senior community. They're more commonly known as the grandparent scam, where the scammers will contact the victim and posing as a family member or a family friend who's in some sort of legal or other emergency, and they need that person's help right away, usually in the form of some sort of money that they'll either get the target to send to them, or the more recent trend we see a lot of is the scammers will actually arrange for someone to come pick up the cash from the target. So there's unfortunately a number of ways they can approach that make it more complicated for seniors to avoid.
Right. And then I've also heard of the landline scam, the hang up scam. And a lot of older individuals are the ones, of course, with these landlines.
Yeah, the landline scam where they contact the person and then they claim that they're hanging up, and then they just keep the line open and the senior doesn't realize that the call hasn't dropped. And so they re-engage posing as somebody different, and the target doesn't know that they're still talking to the scammer, but they have that sense of safety because they thought they hung up and called somebody separate. So that's the prevalence of landlines in that community. Yeah, it does make that one kind of directly targeted at them.
Definitely. Now, some people report they receive frequent text messages and emails about these opportunities to earn lots of money in a short amount of time by investing in cryptocurrency. So what do we need to look out for here?
Basically, when it comes to like the messages like that, anything that's unsolicited is automatically a red flag. I actually got a job offer text message just this morning, but it comes out of the blue. It's unexpected, so I'm not going to buy into that. The other sense to watch out for is they'll usually push it as a very urgent thing, like this is a limited time offer or this is your one chance. And so that gets people to act without thinking. And that's what they rely on to make the scam successful.
Yeah, I know. I've been, targeted in that way as well with the recruitment people or like job opportunities. What are you supposed to do in those cases? Just ignore it?
Usually just ignore it is the best outcome. They tend to flex a lot to different phone numbers on a regular basis. They're very mobile that way. So just ignore it and carry on with your day is always the good recommendation. We also recommend that you kind of spread awareness of these things. So if you successfully identified it as a scam, just when you're around friends or family, just bring it up in conversation so that other people who might not be aware that this is a scam have some heads up and kind of have some information that they can now be equipped with if they get a similar message.
Right. And of course, romance scams also are quite common. So what are some of the telltale signs of this type of scam?
Romance scams are often very dangerous because they play a very long game in the romance scam. They'll spend a lot of time investing in that. So there isn't quite that same sense of urgency pushing the victim to act. The most telltale sign of a romance scam is that you will never be able to meet the person. The scammer will make a lot of plans to meet, but there'll always be something that comes up that prevents that. They'll have a medical emergency or a family emergency or be held up in customs or something like that. So until the point is that you actually meet somebody in person, don't be convinced to send anything, because all those emergencies they identified, the solution will always be, can you send me some money to help out?
Dangerous, and it's so unfortunate. Now, Sean, how do home improvement scams typically play out?
Home improvement scams are a little bit different in that they often have an actual physical local component. So in those cases, there's actually someone who comes to the house and they're usually selling something like water purification equipment or air duct cleaning or something that would be useful for a homeowner. And then what happens is that they will engage in a transaction that has a lot of fine print to it. So if you're getting yourself a water softener or a water purifier equipment, they will often sell it as this was a low cost solution to help your house. But the fine print actually shows, for example, that the person may in fact be renting the equipment for an extended period of time for far more than it would actually cost to buy it outright. And once the person is locked into that contract, it can be difficult for them to get out. So there's a lot of pressure to act on those. They exert a lot of pressure on the homeowner, and then the devil's in the details for the fine print and reading into it, and knowing that if anybody's going door to door selling anything in Alberta, they need to be licensed to do that, both by the province and normally by the municipality. So if anybody is coming door to door selling, check that licensing right away. Don't be pressured into acting on anything promptly. Take time, do some research, check it out before you sign on the dotted line.
So these are actually people coming to your door that you're meeting and interacting with in person.
In most cases, yes. Yeah. And so some time ago, the Alberta government actually made it illegal to sell door-to-door energy solutions like energy efficiency appliances or things like that. So the scammers diverted to other products that aren't technically in that area. So that's where you get the water equipment and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about people like calling you on your phone, on your cell phone, and say pretending to be a phone company or something like that? Has that been on the rise as well lately?
Yes, that's also a very prevalent one. Scammers call posing as a phone company. They'll always have a very good deal to offer. And a lot of what they are aiming for in those scams is when you sign up for a phone contract, you provide a lot of personal information. And so they solicit that personal information from the victim as part of the call. They'll get their name, their address, their date of birth, often some credit information because they'll claim they need to run a credit check. But the information they're harvesting there then allows them to commit identity theft later on.
Right. Is there anything, if you have this person on the phone, is there anything you can do or say to them to kind of like trip them up or like catch them in it? Or is it best to just disengage and call police, or what should we be doing?
Typically, it's best to disengage.
Yeah.
If some people, as a hobby, do like to kind of play along with the scammers just to waste their time. But generally, the advice is always to disengage. And if you have a suspicion that maybe it was a legitimate call, you can always call that company back later and confirm the fact. And the fact is, a real representative, if they are calling you to make a sales pitch, will understand people's concerns, and they'll be okay with you hanging up and calling back because they get that a lot. A scammer won't want you to hang up. A scammer will try to keep you on the line. So yeah, hang up and call them back on a number that you find. Don't call them back on a number that they supply because that'll be a number they control. But find the number your own way and then contact them.
Really good advice there. Thank you for that, Sean. Now, of course, we are in the middle of tax season, so fraudsters often try to impersonate the Canada Revenue Agency. So what kinds of tactics are they using?
Taxes have a kind of a twofold tactic for the scammers. The first is to impersonate Canada Revenue Agency, and that becomes the kind of pressure scams where they'll call and say, "Oh, you have an outstanding tax bill, and if you don't take care of it right away, there's going to be some sort of consequence." And so they create that sense of urgency in the victim, and that's what makes the victim act without thinking. And so then they'll either solicit personal information or get the person to send a payment for their overdue taxes. And they'll often get them to send it in a method that is difficult to trace. So they'll ask the person to pay by gift cards or by cryptocurrency. And those aren't ways that Canada Revenue Agency accepts payment. The other tax angle they like to play is when they put out those phishing scams, they'll say, "Oh, you have a tax return waiting for you that you maybe didn't know of or expect. All you have to do is log into this webpage to collect your tax refund," and they're stealing your personal information in the process.
Oh my goodness. Scary. Okay, so Sean, if an individual has discovered that they have been scammed, do they report it? Who do they call? What should they do?
We always ask that people report it to police. We can't try to solve a crime if nobody tells us about the crime. Though on that note, we also don't mind people calling to check things out either. We're also happy to prevent a crime. So if someone is in a situation where they think it might be a scam, by all means, call your local police and ask them about some information on it. We can supply a lot of that. Beyond reporting it to police, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre is a big partner for police agencies nationwide who gather a lot of data on frauds and how they work and use that to create tools that we can use to combat it. So we also encourage people to report it through the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, which they can do by phone or online.
Okay, great advice there. Now, is there any way to recover your stolen money if you have been victimized in this way?
Unfortunately, in a lot of cases, there's very little chance that we will be able to get money back. The scammers do understand how the system works, and so they do work to convert your money into ways that we can't get back as soon as possible. So they will convert it to cryptocurrency, or they will move it out of Canada and move it to other countries. Many of those countries which aren't necessarily very cooperative with Canadian police investigations. And so they move very quickly to move it beyond reach if they can.
Yeah, you would think there would be a money trail, especially if things are done online, or, I mean, how easy is it to catch these people?
Often there is a trail. The issue is just how fast we can follow that trail. So the scammers can move it very quickly, but in terms of the tools and what we have to go through to follow that trail, that doesn't move as quickly as they do. And once it does move, as I say, overseas or out of Canada, we start to hit barriers where it's beyond our investigative reach because the countries, often in some cases, aren't cooperative with our attempts to investigate.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked about all different kinds of scams, from home improvement scams to telephone company. What other kinds of online purchase scams should we be on the lookout for?
There's a number of online purchase scams. The marketplace scams are always very prevalent when they are selling items on Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or other ones that simply don't exist. In those cases, they will often use that advertisement to solicit a deposit from the interested buyer. So they will put, say, a truck up for sale that's at a very good price that attracts lots of interest. But the scammer will tell the person, well, I've had a lot of interest in this truck. I need you to send a deposit to prove that you're actually serious about this. And so the person isn't necessarily willing to spend all that money up front without seeing the product, but sending a deposit makes sense in some way. So people will send the deposit, and after that, the person cuts off all contact. And they do this for all sorts of products. They do it for vehicles or for puppies. We've had numerous media releases about hay sales where they're targeting farmers with hay that doesn't exist. I've seen them advertising air conditioners during a heat wave because they know people are desperate to find some. So they keep on top of the trends and they build their tactics accordingly.
Smart criminals. Hopefully not too smart for you guys, though.
We do catch our fair share, yes.
Yeah. What about Ponzi or pyramid schemes? I mean, that's been going on for decades, it seems. So is there any way to recognize these?
For Ponzi pyramid schemes, they're often operating as an investment situation, where it's an investment opportunity that doesn't really exist out in the wider world. It's a very, very limited opportunity, very special knowledge. But if you get in now, you can make a lot of money. Any sort of investment that a person is contemplating making, they need to do a lot of research. But the best direction we can point people in that case is to the Alberta Securities Commission. They maintain lists of registered, legally qualified investment brokers and lots of advice on how to avoid investment scams. And so you have that chance to double check whether this is a legitimate opportunity. Anytime the opportunity is being presented as, oh, it's overseas or it's out of Canada, so that Alberta Securities Commission thing doesn't apply, that's a very big red flag. You want to make sure that whoever you're investing with is subject to Canadian regulations and law.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, well, we are out of time here, but really quickly, any final reminders for our viewers on how to sniff out a scam? Basically, if it's too good to be true, then don't go for it.
Yeah, there's the two biggest things we like to point out for a lot of scams is the scammers create a sense of urgency and secrecy because they don't want to give you time to double check. They want you to act fast before you have a chance to check on the opportunity, and they don't want you to talk to other people who might clue you in that this is a scam. So they'll want you to keep it under your hat until they have had a chance to actually take your money. So anytime someone's pushing you to act quickly and to not tell anybody about it, those are two very big red flags.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate your time, Sean.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Corporal Sean Milne is part of the RCMP Alberta Provincial Financial Crime Team.
Part of the Christian faith is an understanding that God has instructed his followers to share the gospel with others in order to evangelize. Many would argue, however, that it's easier said than done. Joining us today to discuss evangelism in the 21st century is Abe Locke, a retired pastor here in Lethbridge. Abe, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. It's been a while.
Yeah. So why does it seem so difficult for many Christians to share their beliefs with others? Is it maybe our own insecurities?
Well, I have to think of what is the meaning of evangelism. First of all, you see, many of us are confused with the term evangelism, and that's why we don't evangelize. We have evangelists in the past, people like Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, the Satara twins, and the list goes on and on, all the time. These are people that have been specifically called to do evangelism as a full-time thing. But what you're talking about is for us as individual believers to be a so-called evangelists, but we will never be the professional evangelists, and that scares us. And we say, well, I can't do it. These guys have it. They know how to do it. They know their Bible and all the rest of that stuff. And so you're right. We live in fear of sharing because we compare ourselves to these evangelists. God hasn't called us all to be that kind of an evangelist. He wants us to evangelize who we are, where we are, in our circumstances, within the group of people that we live. And I think that makes a big difference to how people respond to the term evangelism.
Now, do we tend to think that our neighbors and coworkers are probably not interested in knowing or hearing about Jesus and his saving grace?
I think we think about that a lot, and that means that we haven't developed a proper relationship with them. If we get a relationship with them on a very comfortable one-to-one basis, so we can begin to talk about anything, then we can also talk about Jesus and about what he means and about our belief system. I often think that we're concerned because we don't know the Bible well enough, and that's very true. But you know, I've discovered one of the things that is most effective in my life as an evangelist, or as somebody who is evangelizing, is the fact that if I share what God has done for me, it's very hard for people to argue with that. It's very hard for them to be put aside by that because it's my experience. And when people share their experience, others tend to listen and pay attention.
So, Abe, what do you say to someone who thinks that they need to have all of the right answers before sharing about Jesus? Is it that we have to know our Bible, so all of the answers are right in there?
I think one of the problems is that we don't know our Bible. We maybe attend church once a week, and that's the extent of our Bible study. I teach a Bible study every week, and I kind of give homework and reading for the people because this is an ongoing thing. I cannot expect to talk about farming if I know nothing about farming. I can't expect to be a teacher if I know nothing about how to relate and how to communicate and how to teach. And I think that's one of the big things. We're not sure of what we know. But secondly, I don't think many of us as Christians are sure of what we believe. I have said to my Bible study group, for example, you should work at getting up one sentence to explain your faith. For example, I go back to Paul. What did Paul say? Paul said, we preach Christ crucified, hung on the cross, died, rose again, and is at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. You've got it in a nutshell. So learn a couple of thoughts like that you can approach a person with, and you'll feel much more secure, and they will know you believe what you're saying.
How about approaching a conversation with a stranger and planting a seed for Christ? How do you really approach that?
Well, I used to, when I was a teacher back then, I used to go golfing every once in a while. And I would go alone deliberately so that they would pair me up with 2 or 3 other people on the course in order to have a group out there. And I loved that because as we got to go, we would just chatter. And I would eventually ask them what they did for a living and how they could be on the golf course in the middle of the day or whatever. And they would share with me. And invariably, they would feel the pressure to ask me what I did. And I would say, well, I'm a salesman. Oh, what in the world do you sell? And I said, well, I sell the good news and I sell something that's very special to me. And then I would begin to tell them what the good news is. Would be a natural end for me just to discuss it with them. And sometimes they would simply say to me, I don't want to hear another word. And I would say, well, that's fine. But I just needed to tell you what my belief system is, because we all have one.
Now, what do you say to somebody who tells you, you know what, Abe, I really don't believe in sin?
Yeah, well, I would quote some scripture to them. That's one way. But secondly, I met up with people like this at the university. And I would say, okay, if you don't let me talk about the Bible, that's my basis. And so I'm sorry, we really don't have a baseline to communicate. I said, if you want me to listen to some of the things that you believe in, I'm prepared to do that. However, I expect you then also to respect my belief system so we can have a discussion.
You know, I once had a conversation with someone who didn't know Jesus, and this person said to me that she didn't believe that Jesus was the only way to our Heavenly Father. She says, you know what, as long as we're good people, God loves us all, we'll end up in heaven. But Abe, it even says right in the Bible, no one comes to the Father except through Christ.
That's right. I had a fellow that said to me, well, Mr. Block, I think as long as you're on the bus, you're okay. It doesn't matter which bus you take. And I said, well, would that be good for you to get on any bus if you want to go to California, but it's going up to the Yukon? Well, he said, no, that wouldn't work. And I said, well, it's the same way here. You got to get on the right bus to get to the right destination, or you won't get there.
What are some of the benefits of asking good questions in a conversation with a non-believer?
Very crucial. And I think for me, the key is to build a relationship. If you don't have a relationship, it's like coming in a fog. I mean, the fellow doesn't know where you're coming from, or the person. If you have a little bit of a relationship, at least already, you build up a trust factor. And as you build up a trust factor, they will feel badly if they shut you out. They will let you say a few things at least. Now, I think it's very crucial to build up a trust factor. I was chairman, for example, of the condo association that we are here. So one of the things I tried to do was let the people know, I love to fix things. If you need help, call me. And that was the beginning of relationships where they trusted to just call me to help them, and that would lead to something else.
Do we, as church-going Christians, perhaps maybe spend a little too much time hanging out with believers, fellow believers? I mean, if we really believe that we should be sharing the good news about Christ, then it stands to reason that we should be making more of an effort to reach out to our community, maybe even volunteer?
Absolutely. You see, the thing is with church, and a lot of people have told me, I don't need the church. I've got the Bible and that's fine. No, I'm sorry. You do need the church. The Bible says very clearly, forget not the gathering of the saints, because that's where our encouragement comes from. That's where our support comes from. However, that's not the battlefield. The church is the place where you learn, where you get encouragement, where you get built up, so that when you do meet the others, and how can you evangelize if you're not meeting with people that aren't believers? Jesus went and met with the sinners. That's where he went. And we can't evangelize unless we have sinner friends with whom we have built a relationship, with whom we can communicate, and then the support of the church and the knowledge of the Bible goes with us as we communicate with them.
Let's talk about fellowship then, about building up other believers and helping to inspire them, especially if they want to go out and evangelize. Because no man or woman is an island, right? You need that love and support.
You absolutely do. And I think that God gives us occasions when people say, well, I have no opportunities to talk to non-believers. Wow. God is giving us all kinds of opportunities. We just need to realize them. The other thing I think about is my motto has been, see where God is working and then go and join him. But that takes initiative, and we need to make a decision to do that. And so as we communicate with these people, I think an understanding of where they are coming from is also important. Do I know what they've gone through? Can I relate to the specifics in their life that have been difficult? My present wife and I, we both lost our spouses many years ago. Oh. And you know, it's interesting. When you go through that, it's amazing how people that know that will come and try and communicate with you because they want that encouragement, they want that fellowship, because they know you will understand.
So reaching out to non-believers as well, is it really important to be a sounding board for someone, especially if they're hurting or maybe did lose a loved one, like you just mentioned?
Absolutely. I think, and that's another thing with evangelism. The first thing we have to do is listen. I need to know where people are coming from. I need to understand why they're talking to me the way they are. And if I don't understand that, I'm going to respond in an incorrect way and maybe give them advice that they don't need. I know, for example, I've done a lot of funerals in my life. And one of the things I have experienced from a lot of the people that have talked to me, they've come with the idea, oh, I've had all these people quote scripture to me. I don't want to hear scripture. I want fellowship. I want company. I want somebody to sit with me. I always encourage people, when you are trying to help people like that, don't go and say, give me a call if you have a need. It never works. They're not going to call you. What you do is you go. That's all. You go and knock on the door and bring some food, or you go and you sit with them and cry with them. You just go, because they're going to not respond. And so I think it behooves us to make the move. And you know what? For somebody like me, who is an assertive personality, that's easier than for somebody who's very shy, very inverted and stuff like that. So I don't say it's easy. I just think these are things that we can all work at within how God has created us.
So Abe, what would you list as maybe the top 3 do's and don'ts when it comes to evangelism?
Don't preach. They don't want to hear that. Listen very carefully. And thirdly, share your testimony, which is not a threat. Quoting Bible, and you'll get to that point. You need to. But we often say, well, all you have to do is live a life. That's very important, because you will be the only Bible they will ever read. But eventually, you're going to have to share the gospel with words as well. They go together.
Do you think tracts are still an effective tool for evangelism?
It depends on the area of the world. I know that in some areas of the world, I have heard people are still using tracts. Matter of fact, in some areas, you have these big evangelism meetings still happening. In North America, that's not happening very much anymore, but in other parts of the world, it is. And if it's an appropriate tract, I think it can be very effective. For example, they used to be called the Gideons. They're not that anymore. But I know that they have found new ways. They have a magazine now that they put out. Well, people see the magazine and they take it and they read it, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. But it's not a tract, it's a magazine. And I know that they put out the Gospel of John, and they've got around in our area, and they put them into places that will allow them to be placed. And they're free. And it's amazing how many people will walk into a store and see something that's free and they'll grab it. And I think these kinds of things are very important to try and put places in place where people are comfortable taking it.
Let's talk about missions trips and evangelizing overseas. How important is that today in the 21st century?
Yeah, good question. It depends, I think, on how it's done. I think we have a lot of groups that go to different parts of the world, especially with young people, and they try and give them experiences and training in evangelism. I think that's an excellent way to do it. There's no better way than get your feet wet in certain areas and begin to share the gospel. I think that's very important. And so I think there are many areas in the world that are still very open to that. I'm not sure it's quite as effective in North America. We have become rather self-sufficient. We don't need God, and so I don't need you is the attitude. I can make it on my own until they have a catastrophe or an accident or an illness or something. And then all of a sudden, they might sit and listen. So if we find out those things, we can be a part of that. And that's mission work at home, and that can be mission work abroad. And we have a lot of missionaries that are still going out there and meeting people who haven't heard the gospel or don't want to hear it.
You know what I find really interesting as well? When I was a kid, I'd always hear stories about a lot of North American pastors, preachers going out to different countries in Africa to evangelize. Now those African nations are actually sending missionaries back to North America to evangelize. Because like you said, so many in North America, it's all about themselves and self-centeredness and taking the focus off of God. So that's very interesting right now.
Yeah, it is. I remember watching television. There's an ad that I hate when I watch television, and it's an ad advertising things for women, facial, et cetera, and they always conclude with the comment, "and you are worth it." And I'm thinking, that's the concept that we have in our world. We're worth it. So, serve me. It's me, myself, and I. And that's contrary to where the scripture wants us to go.
Yeah, you're worth it is an entirely different meaning when you talk about Jesus dying on the cross. We were definitely
absolutely
in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Retired Pastor Abe Block, thanks so much for the chat today about evangelism.
You are very welcome. It's a part of my life, and I enjoy it and love it. God bless.
God bless you as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. Thanks so much for watching.